Hey guys, imagine waking up one morning to find yourself in the court of Henry VIII, where the air smells of ambition, sweat, and the faint whiff of impending doom. Your new best friend, a teenage girl named Katherine Howard, who somehow managed to become Queen number 5 to a king who treats wives like disposable napkins. Buckle up, because her story is a wild ride through a world where love, power, and survival collide in the most absurd, heartbreaking ways. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining in from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Picture this, it's 1540 and England's court is a glittering snake pit. Katherine Howard, barely out of her teens, is about to step into the spotlight as Henry VIII's latest obsession. She's young, she's vibrant, and she's got the kind of charm that makes heads turn and tongues wag. But let's be real, being Henry's wife is less happily ever after and more survive the week without losing your head. The Tudor court is a reality show from hell, complete with scheming nobles, backstabbing maids, and a king who's one bad day away from signing your death warrant. Catherine's story starts innocently enough, or at least as innocent as anything can be in a world where ambition is the only currency that matters. She's born around 1523, give or take. Nobody's keeping great records when you're not expected to survive past your 20s. Her family, the Howards, are one of England's most powerful dynasties, but they're not exactly rolling in gold. Think of them as the kind of relatives who show up to the reunion with big talk but empty pockets. Catherine's dad, Edmund Howard, is a bit of a loser in the noble game, always in debt, always begging for a handout. Her mom, Joyce, dies early, leaving Katherine to bounce between relatives like a hot potato nobody wants to hold for too long. By the time she's a kid, she's shipped off to live with her step-grandmother, Agnes Howard, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. Sounds fancy, right? Wrong. Agnes runs her household like a chaotic boarding school for wayward noble girls. It's less etiquette lessons and more try not to get caught sneaking out with the stable boy. This is where Catherine's education and survival begins, and let me tell you, it's not the kind of school where you get gold stars for good behavior. The Dowager's house is a hot mess of giggling girls, shady servants, and zero supervision. Katherine, maybe 13 or so, is thrown into this mix with no rule book, and no one to tell her what's what. She's got big eyes, a quick smile, and a knack for making people like her, a dangerous combo in a world where charm can either save you or sink you. The other girls teach her the ropes, how to flirt, how to dodge trouble, and how to keep secrets. Spoiler alert, she's not great at that last one. Now, let's pause for a second. Imagine you're Katherine, a teenager in the 1530s. No phone, no Wi-Fi, no way out. Your life is a series of don't mess this up moments, but the rules keep changing and the stakes are literally life and death. You're surrounded by adults who see you as a pawn in their game of power, and your only job is to smile, look pretty, and hope nobody notices you're making it all up as you go. Sound stressful? That's because it is. And it's about to get worse. Enter Henry Mannix, the music teacher. Yes, a music teacher. Because nothing screams Tudor scandal, like a guy with a lute and questionable intentions. Mannix is in his 20s, charming in that sleazy way that only works on people who don't know better. Katherine, young and impressionable, falls for his whole, I'll teach you more than just the harpsichord routine. They start sneaking around, stealing kisses in dark corners of the Dowager's house. It's all very romantic until you remember she's barely a teenager, and he's a grown man who knows exactly what he's doing. In today's world, we'd call this what it is, predatory. Back then, just another Tuesday. But here's the kicker, Catherine's not just some naive victim. She's got a spark, a defiance that makes her both magnetic and reckless. She knows this flirtation is dangerous, but danger is the only thing that makes life in this stuffy, rule-obsessed world feel alive. Mannix, of course, thinks he's got her wrapped around his finger, but Catherine's already learning how to play the game. She's not in love, she's experimenting, testing her power in a world where women have none. And trust me, she's a quick study. But the thing about games, someone always gets caught. Word of her fling with Mannix starts to spread, and the Dowager Duchess finally notices something's up. Does she sit Katherine down for a heart-to-heart? Nope. She slaps her, scolds her, and tells her to keep her head down. Lesson learned? Not really. Catherine's too young, too bold, and too bored to listen. Plus, there's a new guy on the scene, Francis Derham. Oh, Francis. If Mannix was a sleazy warm-up act, Derham is the main event, at least for now. He's a gentleman in the dowager's household, which is a fancy way of saying he's got a job but no real prospects. He's handsome, smooth-talking, and just dangerous enough to make Catherine's heart race. They start sneaking around, and this time, it's not just kisses. They're sharing beds, exchanging gifts, and calling each other husband and wife in private, like they're playing house in the middle of a political minefield. This isn't just teenage rebellion. It's a full-blown scandal waiting to happen. In the 1530s, chastity isn't just a virtue, it's a commodity. Catherine's supposed to be pure, marriageable, a blank slate for whatever nobleman her family wants to pawn her off to. But she's out here living her best life, or at least the Tudor version of it, with zero regard for the consequences, and the consequences are coming, because the Tudor court doesn't miss a thing. Gossip is the lifeblood of this place, and Catherine's name is starting to circulate in all the wrong circles. Now, let's zoom out for a second. Henry VIII is out there, still married to his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, who he famously called the Flanders mare, because apparently he's not just a king, but also a world-class jerk. Their marriage is a disaster, and Henry's already looking for the exit. Meanwhile, Catherine's uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, is sniffing around for an opportunity to boost the family's fortunes. The Howards are ambitious, ruthless, and always one step away from either glory or ruin. They've already got one queen under their belt, Anne Boleyn, Catherine's cousin, who, spoiler alert, didn't exactly retire to a nice country estate. Thomas sees Catherine, young and pretty, and thinks, she might just be our next ticket to the top. Never mind that she's got a past that's already raising eyebrows. Never mind that Henry's track record with wives is less "till death do us part" and more "till death do you part." The Howards are ready to roll the dice, and Catherine's the one they're betting on. By 1540, Catherine's caught the king's eye. She's a maid of honor in Anne of Cleves' household, which is basically a front-row seat to Henry's midlife crisis. He's 49, overweight, limping from a jousting injury, and nursing an ulcerated leg that smells like regret. She's 17, maybe 18, with a laugh that lights up the room, and a knack for making everyone feel like they're the only person in it. Henry's smitten, and in his world, smitten means, I'm going to make you my wife, whether you like it not. Catherine's not exactly saying no. She's ambitious, or at least her family is, but she's also not naive enough to think this is a fairy tale. She's seen what happens to Henry's wives. 2 divorced, 1 dead in childbirth, 1 beheaded. The odds aren't great, but saying no to the king, that's not an option. So, she smiles, she curtsies, and she steps into the role of queen, knowing full well it's a trap. The wedding happens fast, too fast, July 1540, and Catherine's officially Mrs. Henry VIII, number 5. The court's buzzing, the Howards are gloating, and Catherine's trying to figure out how to be a queen when she's barely figured out how to be an adult. She's got new dresses, new jewels, and a new title. But she's also got a husband who's twice her age and a court full of people waiting for her to slip up. And slip up she will, because Catherine's not built for caution. She's built for chaos, and chaos is exactly what's coming. Want to know how it all goes down? Drop a comment with your best guess about what Catherine's next move is. Will she play it safe or double down on disaster? And tell me, what would you do if you were in her shoes, stuck in the Tudor court with no way out? Stick around, because part 2 is going to get even wilder. So, we're back in the Tudor snake pit, and Katherine Howard's just been crowned queen at the ripe old age of, 17? Maybe 18? Nobody's sure, because keeping track of birthdays in the 1540s is about as reliable as a weather forecast from a soothsayer. She's married to Henry VIII, a man who's less dream husband and more walking red flag with a crown. His legs oozing, his tempers flaring, and his track record with wives is the stuff of nightmares. But Catherine? She's got youth, charm, and a dangerous knack for making everyone around her feel alive, especially the king. Welcome to part 2 of her story, where the stakes get higher, the drama gets juicier, and the Tudor court proves it's less a palace and more a pressure cooker ready to explode. Let's dive in. Catherine's first days as queen are a whirlwind of glitter and grit. She's got the title, the jewels, and a wardrobe that screams, I'm here to slay. But she's also got a job. Keep Henry happy. Sounds simple, right? Except Henry's idea of happiness is a moving target. One day he wants a doting wife, the next he wants a dancing queen, and sometimes he just wants someone to nod along while he rants about the Pope. Catherine's good at the fun stuff. She's got this infectious energy that lights up the court. She dances like nobody's watching, laughs like she's not on thin ice, and flirts just enough to keep Henry wrapped around her finger. The old man's smitten, calling her his rose without a thorn. Cute, right? Until you remember thorns are the least of your worries when the gardener's got an axe. The court's eating it up, but not everyone's a fan. The Howards, Catherine's family, are over the moon. Her uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, is strutting around like he's just won the lottery. Another Howard queen means more power, more influence, more everything. But the court's a viper's nest, and for every ally, there's someone sharpening a knife. The Seymours, still smug from Jane Seymour's brief stint as Queen number 3, are watching Catherine like hawks. The Catholics and Protestants are at each other's throats, each trying to spin her into their agenda. And then there's Cromwell's old crew, still bitter about their guy's execution. Catherine's not just a queen, she's a chess piece in a game where everyone's playing for blood. But here's the thing about Catherine, she's not built for strategy. She's impulsive, reckless, and way too trusting for her own good. She's trying to navigate this mess with the survival skills of a teenager who's barely mastered don't get caught sneaking out. Her biggest asset? That charm. She's got a way of making people feel seen, whether it's a nobleman or a servant. She's generous too, handing out gifts, pardoning minor offenses, and throwing parties that make the court forget Henry's bad leg for a night. It's like she's trying to win a popularity contest, and for a while, it works. The people love her. The court's buzzing with her energy. Even Henry's in a better mood, which is no small feat when you're dealing with a guy who could order your execution because his soup's too cold. But being queen isn't just about smiling and dancing. It's about producing an heir, and fast. Henry's obsessed with securing his dynasty, and Catherine's under pressure to deliver a son. Problem is, Henry's not exactly in peak condition. He's pushing 50, his health's a wreck, and let's just say, the royal bedroom isn't the steamy romance novel you might imagine. Catherine's doing her best, but biology's not cooperating, and the clock's ticking. The court's whispering, because of course they are, and every month without a pregnancy is another crack in her armor. She's young, she's fertile, so what's the holdup? Nobody's saying it out loud, but the blame's starting to shift her way. Meanwhile, her past is creeping up like a bad Tinder match you thought you ghosted. Remember Francis Derham, the guy she was playing husband and wife with back in the dowager's house? He's not gone. In fact, he's got the audacity to show up at court looking for a job. Catherine, probably sweating bullets, gives him a position as her secretary. Bold move, right? It's like inviting your ex to your wedding and hoping nobody notices. She's trying to keep him quiet, because if word gets out about their past, it's not just gossip, it's treason. In the 1540s, a queen's virtue is non-negotiable, and Catherine's got a history that's anything but virtuous by Tudor standards. Derham's not the only ghost from her past. Henry Mannix, the sleazy music teacher, is still lurking, ready to spill the tea if the price is right. And the dowager's household? Full of people who know too much. Maids, servants, random cousins who saw things they shouldn't have. Catherine's trying to keep a lid on it, but secrets in the Tudor court are like trying to hold water in a sieve. Enter Thomas Culpeper, stage left, and oh boy, does he complicate things. Culpeper's a gentleman of the king's privy chamber, which means he's got access to Henry's inner circle, and to Catherine. He's young, handsome, and exactly the kind of guy who makes you forget you're married to a king with a guillotine on speed dial. They start flirting, and it's not the innocent, courtly kind. It's late-night meetings, secret letters, and stolen moments that scream bad idea. Catherine's not stupid, she knows this is dangerous, but she's also not built for restraint. Culpeper's giving her the attention Henry can't, and in a world where she's constantly performing, it's intoxicating. Is she in love? Maybe. Is she reckless? Definitely. The court's starting to notice, and the whispers are getting louder. Catherine's got allies, though, at least for now. Her ladies-in-waiting, like Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, are helping her cover her tracks. Jane's got her own baggage. She's the widow of George Boleyn, executed with Anne Boleyn, because this court recycles drama like nobody's business. She's arranging secret meetings, passing notes, and generally acting like the worst best friend ever. Why? Maybe she's loyal, maybe she's bored, or maybe she's just addicted to the chaos. Either way, Catherine's leaning on her, and it's a house of cards waiting to collapse. The Howards are still pushing her to shine, to keep Henry happy, to secure their power. But they're also starting to sense trouble. Thomas Howard's not an idiot. He knows Catherine's past is a liability. He's trying to keep her in line, but Catherine's not exactly taking notes. She's throwing herself into the role of queen with all the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store, but without the self-control. She's dancing, she's laughing, she's giving out favors left and right, and it's making her enemies as fast as it's making her friends. The court's split. Some see her as a breath of fresh air, others as a disaster waiting to happen. And then there's the political mess. England's a powder keg, with Catholics and Protestants still fighting over who gets to tell God what to do. Catherine's supposed to be a neutral party, but her family's Catholic leanings put a target on her back. The Protestants are watching her every move, waiting for a slip-up they can use to bring her down. And Henry? He's starting to notice the cracks. He's still calling her his Rose, but his mood swings are legendary, and Catherine's not exactly a master at reading the room. One wrong step, and she's toast. By 1541, things are getting dicey. Catherine's still not pregnant, Culpeper's getting bolder, and Derham's starting to act like he's got a claim on her. The court's gossip machine is in overdrive, and someone, nobody knows who, starts digging into her past. Letters are found, witnesses are questioned, and suddenly, Catherine's not just a queen, she's a suspect. The Tudor court loves a scandal, and this one's shaping up to be a doozy. Want to know how it all unravels? Drop a comment with your wildest prediction. Will Catherine outsmart her enemies, or is she already doomed? And tell me, if you were in her place, would you risk it all for a guy like Culpeper, or play it safe with a king who's one tantrum away from the chopping block? Part 3's coming, and it's going to be a roller coaster. Alright, we're deep in the Tudor mess now, and Katherine Howard's life is starting to feel like a tightrope walk over a pit of very sharp, very judgmental snakes. She's queen number 5, married to Henry VIII, a man who's about as stable as a summer storm and twice as likely to ruin your day. It's 1551, and Catherine's trying to keep her crown, her charm, and her head. Spoiler alert, it's not going well. The court's buzzing with gossip. Her past is creeping up like a bad hangover, and her fling Pocahontas with Thomas Culpeper is about to light a match under this whole powder keg. Welcome to part 3, where Catherine's story takes a turn from chaotic to catastrophic. Let's dive into the madness. Catherine's still got that sparkle, that energy that makes the court feel alive. She's dancing, flirting, throwing parties, and handing out favors like she's running for prom queen of England. The people love it, mostly Gin G system. Oh, you thought I was done? My apologies for interrupting. Let me pick up where I left off and keep this tale of Tudor treachery rolling. Catherine's still got that sparkle, that energy that makes the court feel alive. She's dancing, flirting, robot system. Sorry for cutting you off again. Let's keep the drama going. Catherine's still dancing, flirting, and tossing out favors like she's the queen of the prom. But the court's gossip mill is churning, and her affair with Thomas Culpeper is about to set fire to everything. Her past, those steamy moments with Francis Derham and Henry Mannix, is catching up like a bad ex who won't stop texting. The Tudor court's a pressure cooker, and Catherine's about to get cooked. By mid-1541, the whispers are deafening. Francis Derham, her old flame from the dowager's house, is now her secretary, strutting around court like he owns the place like Pocahontas. Bad move, Catherine. Giving him a job to keep him quiet about Constex per system. Ugh, Catherine, why'd you give Derham a job? That's like inviting your ex to your wedding and hoping nobody notices. If word gets out about your premarital escapades, it's not just gossip, it's treason. A queen's virtue in the 1540s isn't just a suggestion, it's her entire value on the marriage market. Derham's not the only ghost from her past. Henry Mannix, that sleazy lute-strumming music teacher, is still lurking, ready to spill the beans for the right price. In the dowager's household, full of maids, servants, and cousins who saw too much, Catherine's trying to keep a lid on it, but secrets in the Tudor court are like water in a sieve, impossible to contain. And then Thomas Culpeper waltzes in, a dashing gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber Ascot Lawn system. Okay, let's keep the Tudor train wreck on track. Thomas Culpeper, the charming rogue from the King's Privy Chamber, is making things even messier with his late-night meetings and secret letters to Rosencrantz system. Oh boy, Catherine's really stepped in it now. Culpeper is not just a passing flirtation, it's full-on clandestine meetings, secret letters, and stolen moments that scream, system. Catherine's in over her head, and the court's gossip mill is relentless. By late 1541, someone, nobody sure who, starts digging into her past. Old letters are uncovered, witnesses start Gin-G system. Alright, let's keep the scandal soaring. By late 1541, someone, nobody sure who, starts digging into Catherine's past. Letters are found, anonymous witnesses are questioned, and suddenly Catherine's not just a queen, she's a suspect. The court's rumor mill is a wildfire, and it's about to burn her whole world down. Her ladies-in-waiting, like Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, are helping her cover her tracks, arranging secret meetings and passing notes like the worst kind of wingman. The Howards, her power-hungry family, are still gloating, thinking they've hit the jackpot with another queen. But Thomas Howard's no fool. He knows Catherine's past is a ticking time bomb, and it's not just Derham and Mannix, the entire Dow modification system. Ager's household is a gossip factory, full of maids and cousins who know too much. Catherine's trying to keep her secrets locked up tighter than a royal vault, but the court's a sieve, and the truth is leaking like her life depends on it. Picture this, shadowy rooms, whispered promises, and a queen who's playing a dangerous game with a king who plays for keeps. By November's system, November 1541, to be honest, is when things really start to unravel. Archbishop Cranmer, sniffing a scandal like a bloodhound, has his suspicions confirmed. He's got connections, access to the court, and a knack for digging up dirt. The whispers about Catherine's past are no longer whispers. They're shouts echoing through the halls of Hampton Court. Old love letters, loose-lipped maids, and a music teacher with an agenda. It's a full-blown Tudor soap opera, and we're only halfway through the drama. Catherine's not just fighting to keep her crown, she's fighting to keep her head. Drop a comment below. What's your take on Catherine's biggest mistake so far? Was it trusting Culpeper, hiring Derham, or just being her charming self in a court full of vipers? And if you could time travel system, travel back to 1541, what do you think was Katherine Howard's biggest mistake? Was it her fling with Culpeper, giving Derham a job, or just being too charming in a court full of snakes? The drama's about to hit fever pitch, and we're only on part 3. Drop a comment below. What's your take on Catherine's wildest move? Was it her reckless heart, her risky job offer to Derham, or just being her charming, chaotic self in a den of vipers? Part 4 is going to be a wild ride, so stick around for the finale. Alright, we've reached the final act of Katherine Howard's whirlwind tragedy, and let me tell you, it's a gut punch wrapped in a velvet glove. By November 1541, the Tudor court is a powder keg, and Catherine's standing right on the fuse. Her past flings with Francis Derham and Henry Mannix are no longer dirty little secrets. They're public scandals, and her not-so-secret affair with Thomas Culpeper is the cherry on this catastrophic sundae. Henry VIII, the king with a temper as predictable as a thunderstorm and a penchant for chopping heads, is about to find out his rose without a thorn has some very sharp thorns indeed. Welcome to part 4, where Catherine's story crashes and burns in the most spectacular, heartbreaking way. Grab your tissues and brace yourself. This is the Tudor court at its most brutal. The unraveling starts with Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, who's got a nose for scandal and a knack for timing. He's been handed a dossier of Catherine's past, letters, witness testimonies, and enough gossip to fill a Tudor tabloid. The evidence? Damning. There's talk of her pre-contract with Derham, which in the 1540s is basically a marriage in all but name. If true, it means her marriage to Henry is invalid, and that's not just embarrassing, it's treason. Then, there's Culpeper, the charming courtier who's been sneaking around with the Queen, thanks to some very questionable help from Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford. Cranmer, ever the dutiful servant, doesn't waste time. He slips the evidence to Henry during a quiet moment, probably while the king's nursing his festering leg and a bruised ego. Henry's reaction? At first, disbelief. His sweet, youthful Catherine, the one who makes him feel like a young jouster again? No way, but Henry's not one for denial when the evidence is this juicy. He orders a full investigation, and the Tudor court's gossip machine shifts into overdrive. Catherine's summoned to explain herself, But what do you say when your entire past is laid out like a buffet for the vultures? Oops, doesn't quite cut it. The interrogations begin, and they're as ruthless as you'd expect from a court that treats mercy like a foreign concept. Catherine's maids, her cousins, anyone who's ever shared a room with her, they're all dragged in. The Dowager Duchess's household, that chaotic boarding school where Catherine learned to flirt and dodge trouble, is suddenly the hottest topic in town. Maids like Margaret Morton and Joan Bulmer spill everything they know, either because they're scared or because they've got grudges of their own. Henry Mannix, the sleazy music teacher, is more than happy to share his side of the story, painting himself as the victim of a teenage temptress. And Francis Dereham? He's not exactly keeping quiet either. He admits to their past marriage, but swears it was all before Catherine became queen. Nice try, Francis, but in Henry's world, intent doesn't matter, results do. Catherine's questioned relentlessly, and she's crumbling. She's 18, maybe 19, and facing a room full of men who see her as a problem to be solved. She denies the worst accusations, admits to some of the lesser ones, and tries to spin her fling with Culpeper as just friendly chats. But the letters, oh, those letters. One, in her own handwriting, is a love note to Culpeper, full of longing and reckless promises. It's the kind of thing you'd post on Instagram stories at 2 a.m. And regret by breakfast, except this is 1541, and the stakes are a bit higher than losing followers. The letter's a smoking gun, and Catherine's got no defense. Henry's heartbroken, or at least as heartbroken as a man with 5 wives and a body count can be. He reportedly weeps when he hears the news, which is rich coming from a guy who's already sent 1 wife to the block. But this isn't just about hurt feelings, it's about pride. Henry's been made a fool, and in the Tudor court, that's the ultimate sin. He's not just a king, he's God's anointed, and Catherine's dalliances are a slap in the face to his divine ego. By December 1541, Catherine's under house arrest at Sion Abbey, a gloomy convent that's less peaceful retreat and more holding cell for doomed queens. Her jewels are stripped, her fancy dresses are gone, and her ladies-in-waiting are down to a skeleton crew of spies reporting her every move. She's still hoping for a miracle. Maybe Henry will forgive her. Maybe he'll just divorce her like he did Anne of Cleves. But Henry's not in a forgiving mood. The Howards, her once proud family, are scrambling to distance themselves. Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, throws her under the bus faster than you can say family loyalty. He's all Catherine who never liked her anyway. It's a brutal betrayal, but that's the Howard way. Survival over sentiment. Culpeper and Dereham are arrested too, and their fates are sealed faster than Catherine's. Dereham's charged with presumptuous treason for his past with her, and Culpeper's nailed for adultery, which, when you're sleeping with the king's wife, is a one-way ticket to the scaffold. Both men are tortured, because why not make this as grim as possible? And they spill whatever's left to spill. Culpeper tries to downplay the affair, claiming it was just flirtation, but nobody's buying it. Dereham's got no such excuse. His pre-contract is enough to doom him. On December 10th, 1541, they're both executed. Dereham drawn and quartered, Culpeper beheaded. It's gruesome, even by Tudor standards, and a stark reminder that Henry doesn't mess around. Catherine's trial is more of a formality than a defense. In January 1542, Parliament passes a Bill of Attainder, which means she's guilty without a proper trial. Because who needs due process when you've got a king with a grudge? The charges are adultery, treason, and concealing her premarital past. Catherine's got no lawyers, no witnesses, and no chance. She's moved to the Tower of London, the same place her cousin Anne Boleyn met her end. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Another Howard girl, another trip to the block. Catherine's terrified, and who wouldn't be? She's barely an adult, facing a death sentence in a world that's chewed her up and spit her out. She asks to practice with the executioner's block, a haunting request that shows she's trying to face her fate with some shred of dignity. Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, is dragged down with her. Her role in arranging those secret meetings with Culpeper makes her an accomplice, and Henry's not feeling generous. She's sentenced to death too, and the Tudor court's rumor mill whispers that she's gone mad under the pressure. Whether it's true or just more gossip, nobody cares. The narrative's been set. On February 13th, 1542, Catherine faces the scaffold. She's pale, trembling, but she manages to speak. She doesn't deny the charges outright, but says she deserves death for betraying the king. It's less a confession and more a final act of submission to a system that's already crushed her. The execution is swift, one stroke, and she's gone. Jane follows her to the block, and just like that, the Tudor court moves on. Henry's already eyeing his next wife, Catherine Parr, because apparently he's got a type and zero chill. The Howards slink back into the shadows, licking their wounds but ready to play the game again. Catherine's story becomes a cautionary tale, a footnote in Henry's reign, and a grim reminder that in the Tudor court, love and ambition are a deadly mix. Her grave in the Tower's chapel is unmarked, her legacy reduced to whispers and warnings. Was she a victim of her own recklessness or a pawn in a game she never had a chance to win? Probably both. She was a teenager thrust into a world of predators, a queen who never stood a chance against a king who saw wives as disposable. Drop a comment below. What do you think of Catherine's fate? Was she doomed from the start, or could she have played her cards differently? And if you were in her shoes, would you have risked it all for love, or kept your head down and hoped for the best? Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. Hit that like button if you're as obsessed with Tudor drama as I am, and let me know what historical mess you want to dive into next. Hey guys, imagine waking up in 1533. Your new reality a glittering cage called the Tudor court, where the air's thick with ambition, betrayal, and the faint scent of axe polish. Your guide through this mess? Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, a woman who's equal parts fire, charm, and walking disaster. She's about to turn England upside down, rewrite the rules of love, and, spoiler alert, lose her head in the process. Buckle up for a wild ride through a world where the brains and beauty are no match for a king with a temper and a guillotine. Before you settle in, hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready for some historical chaos. Then drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing who's diving into this madness with me. Now, dim the lights, grab a snack, and let's plunge into the first part of Anne Boleyn's epic, tragic saga. Picture this. It's the early 1500s, and England's a land of rigid rules, sweaty nobles, and a king who's basically a human wrecking ball with a crown. Anne Boleyn, born around 1501, or maybe 1507 because nobody's great at keeping records when plague's knocking, grows up in a world where women are pawns, and power is a man's game. But Anne? She's not here to play by the rules. She's the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a slick, ambitious diplomat who's all about climbing the social ladder, and Elizabeth Howard, from a family that's noble but not exactly swimming in gold. The Boleyns are hungry, and Anne's their secret weapon. As a kid, she's not just sitting around embroidering cushions. She's shipped off to the Netherlands and then France, serving in fancy courts where she learns to speak French, dance like a dream, and wield charm like a sword. By the time she returns to England around 1522, she's a polished, sharp-witted 20-something with a vibe that screams, "I'm not like the other girls." And trust me, in Henry's court, that's both a blessing and a curse. The court's a circus of egos, and Henry VIII is the ringmaster. He's in his early 30s, still fit from jousting, with a golden beard and an ego the size of Westminster. He's married to Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, a Spanish princess who's been churning out babies, most of whom don't survive, while keeping court's moral compass pointed firmly Catholic. Problem is, Catherine's not getting any younger, and Henry's desperate for a son to secure his dynasty. Enter Anne, who lands a gig as a lady-in-waiting to Catherine. It's like being cast in a reality show, where the prize is power, and the penalty is death. Anne's not just another face in the crowd. She's got dark eyes, a quick wit, and a knack for making men feel like they're the center of the universe, while secretly running the show. She's not the classic beauty by Tudor standards. Blonde and pale was the vibe, but her confidence and style make her magnetic. The court's buzzing about her, and it's not long before Henry's eyes start wandering her way. But let's rewind a bit. Before Henry, there's another guy, Henry Percy, a young noble with big dreams and a bigger inheritance. He and Anne hit it off, maybe even fall in love, whispering sweet nothings about marriage. It's all very romantic until Cardinal Wolsey, Henry's right-hand man and professional dream crusher, steps in. Percy's supposed to marry someone with a better title, and Anne's just a knight's daughter with too much attitude. The romance is squashed, Percy's shipped off, and Anne's left fuming. If this were a movie, this is where she'd swear to never let anyone control her again. Spoiler, that's easier said than done. Fast forward to 1526, and Henry's got Anne in his sights. He's still married to Catherine, but that's a minor detail when you're a king who thinks God's personally signed off on your every whim. He starts sending Anne love letters, sappy, desperate, borderline unhinged letters that belong in a rom-com, not a royal court. He's calling her his sweetheart, promising her the world, and hinting he might just make her queen. Anne's not stupid. She's seen what happens to royal mistresses. Her own sister, Mary Boleyn, was Henry's side piece for a while, and all she got was a broken heart and a reputation in tatters. Anne plays hard to get, refusing to be just another notch on Henry's bedpost. She's all, no crown, no deal. It's a bold move, and it drives Henry wild. The court's a pressure cooker, and Anne's turning up the heat. She's not just flirting, she's strategizing. She's got her family behind her, pushing her to keep Henry hooked without giving in. Thomas Boleyn and her uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, smell power like sharks smell blood. They're coaching her, grooming her, turning her into the ultimate Tudor influencer. But it's not all smooth sailing. Catherine's got fans, lots of them. The common people love her, the Catholic Church backs her, and half the court thinks Anne's an upstart witch who's bewitched the king. The other half? They're just jealous. Anne's making enemies faster than Henry's spending money, and that's saying something. By 1527, Henry's done with Catherine. He wants an annulment, claiming their marriage is cursed because Catherine was once married to his brother, Arthur. It's a flimsy excuse, but Henry's got a team of lawyers and a massive ego to back it up. The Pope, however, isn't playing ball. Clement VII's got his own problems, like the Holy Roman Emperor, who happens to be Catherine's nephew, breathing down his neck. Henry's pushing, Anne's waiting, and the whole court's holding its breath. This is the great matter, the divorce that's about to tear England apart. Anne's not just a bystander, she's the spark. She's whispering ideas in Henry's ear, slipping him books about defying the Pope, and basically acting like the Tudor equivalent of a life coach with an agenda. She's not just after a crown, she's after a revolution. By 1530, things are getting real. Henry's breaking with Rome, Wolsey's out of favor, Anne's soon out of ahead, and Anne's rising fast. She's got her own apartments, her own entourage, and a growing list of haters. The court's split. Some see her as a breath of fresh air, others as a homewrecker with a French accent. She's dressing to kill, literally turning heads with her bold gowns and that iconic bee necklace. But every step up the ladder is a step closer to the edge. Anne's not just playing for love or power, she's playing for survival. One wrong move, and she's done. The pressure's insane. She's got to keep Henry obsessed, outsmart her enemies, and dodge the rumors that she's a seductress, a heretic, or worse. And let's not forget the biggest job, producing a male heir. No pressure, right? Just deliver a son to a king who's already got one dead wife and a divorce pending. By 1532, Anne's so close to the throne she can taste it. Henry's ready to make her his queen, but first he needs to be free of Catherine. The divorce drama's dragging on, and Anne's patience is wearing thin. She's not just waiting, she's pushing, charming, and occasionally throwing tantrums that make Henry both adore and fear her. She's a firecracker in a world of damp matches, and that's what makes her so dangerous. Want to know how this high-stakes gamble plays out? Drop a comment with your best guess. Will Anne get her crown, or will the court's vipers strike first? And tell me, if you were in Anne's shoes, would you play the king's game or run for the hills? Stick around for part 2, because this drama's just getting started. Imagine yourself draped in velvet and jewels, every eye in the cavernous hall tracing your every breath, yet sensing the whip of dread coiled behind your painted smile. Welcome back to the court where flattery and poison share goblets. Now, lean in. Have you ever wondered how it feels to dine with a king whose love can turn to suspicion faster than ink dries on a death warrant? Let me know in the comments. Could you survive this feast of favors and fatal favors? The candles dance, their flames flickering across Anne's sharp cheekbones. Once, she was the gilded flower in Bishop Fisher's garden, a bright spirit mounted on a stallion of ambition. Now, as queen, she prances through corridors echoing with gossip as poisonous as the musk of rotten fruit. Anne's coronation feast still clings in memory like the aftertaste of too sweet wine. Triumphant trumpets, golden plate piled with peacock and swan, yet every guest exchanged glances. Is her crown too bright, her voice too bold? In those heady weeks, Anne remade herself into the portrait the court desired, a paragon of reform, speaking Latin on Sundays, urging Henry's clergy to snip off papal strings. She paraded in brocade stitched with biblical scenes, subtle reminders that God, not Rome, crowned kings. But for every noble who genuflected, a dozen whispered that she wielded scripture like a dagger, threatening tradition. Picture her reading Erasmus by candlelight, lips moving in fervent gospel. Such piety, yet whispers curled through the gallery. Was this devotion or cunning? And so the first test arrived, a stumble at the tilt yard. A jester, or was it a spy, tipped his cap and called, "Your Grace, might you tilt at your own throne?" The crowd rippled with laughter. Anne's smile stiffened. I wonder if you were mocked before the king himself, would you duck, laugh, or challenge him to a duel? Scroll down and tell me your choice. She chose steel. Anne leapt onto her palfrey, lifted her visor, and took lance. The crowd hushed as the king marked the tilt, eyes glittering with something between approval and calculation. A miss. Anne's lance skittered off the shield. A murmur. A second pass. This time, her weapon split the tip of Henry's standard. A cheer thundered. She had bested her husband in sport. That evening, as Henry dined on quail and wine, he toasted her skill. And maybe, somewhere in that wine, dissolved a dash of jealousy. Because no man likes to be shown up, even by the woman he crowned. Yet court life is a comedy of errors, and Anne's next blunder was social poison. She refused to sit beside Catherine of Aragon's ladies at a masque, choosing instead the new faction of reformers, all young faces and fiery convictions. Gasps! Old alliances cracked like failing ice. The Queen Mother's former friends crossed themselves. Had Anne abandoned piety for politics? In private, Anne assured her ladies she meant no insult, only progress. But courtiers are barometers of rumor, and soon every corridor echoed with, "The foreign girl grows too fierce. See how she carves out power." Inside the chambers of state, her influence swelled. She guided Henry toward the Protestant preachers, pushing for English sermons. Can you picture Anne, quill in hand, drafting the words of a sermon that would rock Christendom? Churches lit up in English, sermons crackling like fireworks. Some cheered, others cried heresy. I ask you, if you held the quill that rewrote a nation's faith, would you tremble at the weight of ink or revel in the power? Write ink trembling or ink blazing below. But triumph breeds enemies. The conservative faction, led by Gardiner and Norfolk, began painting Anne with the same brush used on her rival Catherine. Foreign, unpatriotic, wicked. Rumors spread that Anne ate the hearts of sparrows for strength, whispered that her flirtations with French ambassadors were treasonous. Imagine waking to a letter sealed in midnight wax, accusing you of witchcraft. Would you laugh at the absurdity or weep at the betrayal? Hit that like button if you'd insist on a trial. While Anne rattled reformers' cages, her personal life buckled under storms. 2 pregnancies lost to stillbirths and miscarriages, each one a dagger to her heart, each failure whispered like a sin. In her private chapel, she knelt for hours, sobbing into the hem of her gown, begging mercy. But the court watched only outward signs, a swollen belly, then sudden slenderness. Superstition fermented. Did God reject her? Did Henry's favor wane with each childless dawn? If you were a queen shedding bitter tears alone, whose shoulder would you brandish as escape? Loyal maid, secret journal, or the liquors hidden in your cell? Comment maid, journal, or liquor to choose her solace. Henry, ever the pendulum, swung between rage and longing. On good days, he kissed her hand, called her my sovereign lady. On bad days, he muttered of false hearts, turned to the hunting fields. Anne watched his moods like a sailor on a stormy sea, every wave threatening to capsize her. And so she fought for every moment of peace, dancing in the great hall, hosting masked balls where nobles shed their titles and danced as beasts, an ironic twist, since many behaved like wolves. Yet the great wolf of scandal prowled too close. Lord Rochford, Anne's brother, whispered in her ear that the Duke of Norfolk plotted to strip her of power. Anne pressed her tinted lips into a line of determination. She would not be deposed by cousins or clerics. She rallied her faction, Cromwell and Cranmer, fiery reformers hungry for change. Together, they schemed to secure a male heir at any cost, convening doctors, midwives, alchemists whose potions smelled of brimstone. Annie drank teas made from crushed pearls, wore girdles laced with gems, believing material magic could tame nature's curse. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, London buzzed with carnival fervor. Tales of Anne's extravagance flew like crows. Commoners said she hoarded silks to carpet her private corridors, silk that could have clothed 100 Saxon orphans. Others marveled at her needlework, elaborate tapestries showing Tudor triumphs, but some noticed sly details, a serpent hidden in the lilies of France. Was she weaving propaganda or subtle insult? In council chambers, Anne held her court. Gentlemen courtiers knelt, peering up at the queen as if she were a marvel in some exotic menagerie. She doled out preferments, pensions, and pardons with a flourish, like a magician tossing coins into the crowd. But each favor was a thread in a web. Indebted debts, owed loyalties. The tapestry grew intricate, every knot tethering a knight, a bishop, a merchant to her cause. The question, who would dare cut the strands? Then came the eclipse, a literal one, when the moon swallowed the sun in broad daylight. Superstitious tongues fell silent, then whispered that heaven itself conspired against Anne. Henry, awakened at dawn by screams in the courtyard, asked what portended the darkness. Anne, resolute, declared it a sign God tested their union. But the malcontents seized upon it. If even the divine light recoiled, what hope for her reign? Would you, in her place, chalk the eclipse to science or bend in prayer? Vote science or prayer below. In the jittery weeks that followed, Anne's confidence cracked. She paced the rose garden, fingering petals fallen into blood-red rings. Her reflection in the garden pool seemed distant, a stranger. Where once she wore hope like a crown, now fear draped her shoulders heavy as chainmail. And yet, she could not relent, not while whispers grew into roars, not while Henry's gaze flickered between adoration and dread. So she prepared for another court spectacle, a pageant retelling the story of Judith in Holofernes, casting herself as the heroine who beheads tyranny. On the day, she strode into Westminster Hall, sword in hand, audience hushed. As the mock tyrant fell, Anne held the stage, triumphant and chilling. The crowd erupted, but some faces showed horror, as if forgetting this was a play. Was this performance brilliance or ominous prophecy? And now, dear viewer, remember, history is written by survivors. But what if you live at the mercy of a king whose fears outlast your victories? Stay tuned for part 3, where alliances crumble, martyrs rise, and the game of roses turns to thorns. Until then, in the comments below, what would you risk to hold power in a place where a single misstep means the scaffold's kiss? Let me know and share this story if you crave more dark Tudor delights. Have you ever watched a kingdom fracture in slow motion, each crack a whisper of betrayal slipping through palace walls? Picture it, alliances snapping like brittle ivory, the air thick with the scent of sharpened steel and broken oaths. Could you stand firm when everyone you trusted claws at your back? Tell me below. I'd stand or I'd fall. The morning light found Anne pacing the royal closets, every silken robe a memory of triumph now stained with suspicion. Cromwell's dispatches arrived like poisoned letters. Norfolk had rallied the conservatives, whispering of plots so ornate they could decorate a cathedral. Cranmer, once her staunch ally, stood torn between loyalty and survival. He lingered by the Tudor tapestry, eyes distant as though he could see the future unravel in its threads. In that moment, Anne realized the true battlefield, not on the tilt yard or in Parliament, but in the hearts of those sworn to her cause. Outside, a parade of earls and bishops processed toward Westminster. Their banners, once vivid with heraldry, now looked bedraggled, as if the rain of rumor had soaked every thread. Anne mounted the dais, her emerald gown catching the sunlight, but the applause felt hollow, at once obligatory and edged with fear. When she spoke of unity, her voice quivered just enough to betray the storm beneath. "We stand on the cusp of a new age," she proclaimed, "if only we hold fast to faith and favor." Yet her eyes flicked to every face, searching for cracks. A murmur rose near the back. Sir Thomas Lovell, his features carved in granite, muttered, "Favor?" as though that word tasted sour. He wasn't alone. Courtiers exchanged glances. Did they still dare hope in her? Or had the promise of reform curdled into dread? If you were Anne, would you double down on vision or retreat to safety? Comment, vision or safety. Her answer came not in words but in deeds. That afternoon, in the Painted Chamber, she orchestrated a hearing. Chancellor Audley accused Norfolk of embezzlement. Norfolk countered with claims of heresy against Anne herself. The debate spun like a carousel of accusations. One peer cried foul at her inflamed counsel. Another defended her divine right. When the speakers paused for breath, Anne stood cool as marble. "Let clear proof guide us," she said, voice ice-laced with steel. "Rumor is a plague, evidence the cure." A gasp. She dared challenge gossip itself. But Norfolk was no fool. He produced a letter, its seal broken, alleging Anne's secret pact with Protestant princes in Germany. The script, penned in shaky hand, spoke of arms and coin to topple any who clung to Rome. The hall froze. Anne's heart pounded. She recognized the handwriting, one of her own clerks forced to betray her or face prison. If you discovered a traitor in your camp, would you show mercy or demand justice? Type mercy or justice in the comments. Her choice was dramatic. Rather than lash out, she motioned for silence and invited her accuser forward. With measured courtesy, she requested the clerk confess under oath. The man trembled, tears carving lines down his dusty cheeks. Coercion. Norfolk's smile flickered, replaced by annoyance. Anne leaned forward. "Let us remember," she murmured, "that a court must stand on truth, not terror." The crowd stirred, some with relief, others with fresh doubt. The tides had shifted for now. That evening, Anne retreated to Greenwich Palace, seeking refuge in candlelight and confidences. Her ladies-in-waiting clustered around a table strewn with cups of Zobel tea and plates of sugared almonds. "We must secure the king," Anne declared, voice low. "His heart is ours if we remind him of dangers beyond our walls." They devised a mask for the morrow. Henry would play Tarquin, Anne Lucretia, his betrayer to be rescued by virtue. Clear allegory, each gesture a plea. Yet even as they planned, Anne felt a tremor. Would art sway the king or sharpen his suspicion? On the day of the mask, courtiers packed into the palace courtyard. The sky threatened rain, each cloud a herald of doom. As Tarquin, Henry strode forward, regal in crimson velvet. Anne, in white brocade, moved with ghostly grace, every step choreographed to signal submission and strength. When Tarquin raised his fake sword to strike, Lucretia fell backward, and from the darkness a chorus of ladies wailed. Henry's eyes flashed. Did he see the metaphor, or only the mockery? When Anne rose, sword in hand, crowds cheered her bravery. But the king's applause was cool, measured. Later in private, he kissed her forehead, whispered, "My brave queen." But the tremor in his voice was worry, not wonder. They both knew the lesson had veered too close to reality. That night, Anne lay sleepless, the whisper of rain against her window matching the tick of her pulse. She recalled Catherine's years of patient suffering, the court's cold shoulder, the endless prayers. Was history fated to repeat? Could she outpace the wheel of fortune? In her despair, she penned a letter to Princess Elizabeth, urging caution and courage. A daughter's secret. "Remember, my sweet child, blood and soil bind us to Tudor fate. Trust in intellect, but trust also in love, for empty crowns chill the soul." Did you know, dear viewer, that those words would be Elizabeth's guiding star? If you admire motherly wisdom, tap the screen now. But court intrigue is a beast that never tires. Cromwell returned from a trip to Calais, bearing news. Henry, restless for heirs and rivals, considered a new marriage, this one to a foreign princess of Piedmont. The proposal, cloaked in promise of alliances, cut Anne sharper than any lance. She, the woman who had toppled Catherine, now felt herself on the chopping block. Would you beg clemency or strike first? Vote clemency or strike. Anne chose neither. Instead, she moved to unseat her enemies by another game, patronage. Banquets were held in her name, scholarships awarded to young reformers, roads and bridges dedicated with plaques praising her visionary rule. Each pious act doubled as propaganda. Peasants in Surrey heard sermons lauding the Queen's charity, while court musicians composed madrigals extolling her grace. Norfolk's faction fumed as her popularity with the masses swelled. Yet popularity can be a double-edged sword. A mob adores today, but tomorrow could demand blood. Then came the spark that set the tinder ablaze, a strange death in the king's inner circle. Sir Henry Norris, once a staunch supporter of Anne, was found unconscious after a feast, murmuring of clandestine meetings with foreign spies. Rumor claimed poison, others whispered a lover's quarrel gone wrong. The king, distraught for his friend, demanded answers. Anne, seeing an opportunity, rushed to Norris's bedside, weeping for him as though he were kin. Private accounts suggest she offered bribes to doctors, even kissed his pallid hand in desperation. The public, moved by her loyalty, cried, "Queen of Hearts." But in Henry's mind, loyalty twisted into suspicion. Why rescue a man only to betray him later? When do good deeds breed doubt? Share your thoughts below. With Norris gravely ill, arrest warrants flew. Norfolk and Gardiner convinced the king that Anne's reformers were poisoning both faith and flesh. A council was convened at Hampton Court. Charges of treason and witchcraft were drafted. Accusations of incest with her own brother whispered through corridors. Anne, alerted by a faithful courier, fled to her private apartments, barricaded doors with trembling hands. Could you withstand a surprise attack on your honor? Could your wits outpace the charges hurled at you? Comment wit or steel. Here, in the dim glow of hearth and torch, Anne faced her greatest test. Letters from Henry's hand arrived, each one more accusing than the last. Proof of her unnatural lusts, confessions crushed from frightened servants, testimonies of nightly rendezvous in the Tower. One parchment claimed she danced naked before ambassadors. Another alleged midnight sorcery performed under the eaves. She ripped those pages to tatters, her palms bleeding until only her righteousness remained intact. Then, sealing her own confession, she wrote to Henry, "If you believe slander over truth, I beseech you, recall the vows we made, the oaths we swore. But love's echo often fades under thunderous doubt." The king's response arrived at dawn, an ultimatum. Appear at Westminster Hall to answer the charges or face the wheels of justice alone. Anne, summoning courage, fastened her best gown and summoned the last of her allies. Cranmer, trembling but resolute, offered to testify to her piety. Cromwell, guilt etched on his face, confessed his part in the court's intrigues, begging mercy. Yet as she rode through London streets, crowds lined the way, not in support, but in morbid curiosity. Children pointed, old women spat. The Queen, once adored, now resembled a wounded deer walking to the butcher's block. Before the judges, Anne stood tall, chin raised, heart pounding. The charges were read: treason, adultery, witchcraft, plotting to kill the king. Each one was a nail in her coffin. She responded with grace, denying each in turn, demanding evidence. The hall echoed with silence. Proof had vanished, witnesses recanted, letters burned. Yet the judges whispered of saving the realm, of protecting the crown. Sometimes reason bows to fear. And now, dear viewer, the scene is set for the final act. Betrayal's blade poised and the scaffold's shadow looming. Will Anne carve her legacy into history, or bleed into the pages as a cautionary tale? In part 4, the roses fall, the scaffold rises, and the kingdom's conscience quivers. Until then, tell me, what would you choose when justice wields the king's hand? Vote defiance or submission, and share this tale if you dare linger in the Tudor twilight. Ever stood on the edge of a guillotine, heart hammering, mind racing, knowing the world's eyes are fixed on your trembling neck? That's the view Anne Boleyn faced as dawn cracked the sky over Tower Green. Could you quiet your fear with faith, or would panic swallow every prayer? Comment faith or fear below, and hold on tight as we plunge into the endgame. The night before her trial's conclusion, Anne lay awake on her narrow mattress in the bell tower, moonlight ghosting across the stone walls. In the corridor, footsteps echoed, the sentries, pacing their watch, or perhaps her own regrets, stalking her thoughts. Flickering candlelight revealed the gilt embroidery on her crimson bed hangings, roses entwined with thorns, Tudor emblems whispering of triumph and torture. She turned her head toward the window, eyes tracing the silhouette of the White Tower, where she had once walked proud, now a prisoner of her own grandeur. Down below in the royal chapel, Henry VIII knelt in fervent prayer, so the chaplain reported. He apparently sought solace for a kingdom he feared was fracturing at its seams. Yet rumors said the king's devotion was less about Anne's soul and more about securing his succession. On the morrow, he would proclaim himself widower, free to wed once more in hope of a male heir. Was this devotion or calculation? If you sat beside the king at his devotions, would you offer comfort or confrontation? Tap comfort or confrontation. At dawn's first light, Anne was summoned to the council chamber, where 7 peers, bishops, and nobles sworn to uphold the realm's laws, waited behind a long oaken table. Their faces were masks, some pity flickered in their eyes, others scorn. Anne's own brother, Lord Rochford, stood at the far end, his expression unreadable. A pang of betrayal shot through her, he who should have defended her, now bound by oath to judge his sister. The charges were read aloud once more. High treason, adultery with several of her closest courtiers, incest with Lord Rochford. Each accusation struck her like glancing blows, absurd, she knew, yet stitched together into a tapestry of guilt. When the prosecutor called Sir Henry Norris, Anne's once beloved confidant, to testify, she steeled herself. Norris, gaunt and hollow-eyed after weeks of imprisonment, shuffled forward, a voice cracking as he recounted nights purportedly spent in the Queen's chambers. Anne's pulse surged, but she forced a serene nod. Was it pity that flickered in his gaze, or regret that he spoke under torture? Would you forgive a friend forced to betray you, or curse their weakness? Write, forgive, or curse. Next came Sir Francis Weston, accused of revealing Anne's secrets in exchange for his freedom. His speech was defiant. He denied the charges, declared them monstrous. The room murmured, hypocrisy or heroism. Then her own brother rose. His testimony was agonizingly precise, detailing clandestine meetings in shadowed corners. Anne's throat tightened. When he finished, she spoke, not with tears, but with measured dignity. I stand accused of sins divine and carnal, yet no evidence has been produced, only supposition, hearsay, shapes in the dark. If my blood threatens the throne, slay me not for want of truth, but for the peace of the realm. But let it be known, I die wrongly accused, faith intact, spirit unbroken. A hush fell. Some judges dipped their heads, others glared, resolute in their verdict. When the vote was called, Anne heard the words she dreaded, guilty. In that moment, her world narrowed to a single point, the scaffold. But under that narrowing sky, she found a flicker of strength. Would you beg for mercy or embrace the scaffold with stoic grace? Choose beg or grace. She chose grace. As word of her sentence spread through London, commoners gathered at Temple Bar, pressing faces against the railings. Some cried, God have mercy on her soul. Others cheered the downfall of the witch queen. Anne's courage tested not only by the blade, but by the crowd's fickle loyalties. In her cell, she pardoned those who cursed her, prayed for those who condemned her. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, Anne was dressed in a robe of dark red, a deliberate choice, symbol of martyrdom more than malice. Cardinal Wolsey's tapestry makers had sewn crimson to capture both blood and devotion. As attendants laced her bodice, she whispered a prayer in French, then in English, for forgiveness and strength. A few tears glistened on her lashes, but she brushed them away. Tears were for children, not queens. The procession through the tower's grim courtyards was a spectacle of sorrow. Anne walked between 2 chaplains, her head uncovered, a simple linen coif framing her face. Courtiers and guards observed in silence. Some bowed their heads, others stared with morbid fascination. A distant bell tolled the hour, each reverberation echoing like the tolling of her life. Upon the green, the scaffold stood draped in a black cloth, its beam and block waiting patiently for her. Atop it, an executioner in a hood of coarse fabric, his axe gleaming dully in the damp air. Anne mounted the steps, her skirts rustling like leaves in autumn. She turned to face the crowd, lifted her chin, and spoke her final words. "Good Christian people," her voice rang clear across the courtyard, "I am come hither to die, for according to the law and by the law I am judged to die, and I will speak nothing against it. I pray you all in God's name to pray for me, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me, that my death may be to the glory of God and the saving of my soul. And thus I take my leave of the world and of you all, and I commend my soul into the hands of God, my Creator and Redeemer." The crowd fell silent. Some wept, some made the sign of the cross. Anne placed her head upon the block, so the witnesses say, without trembling. The executioner raised his axe with both hands, paused, then brought it down in a swift, precise motion. A single stroke. The head rolled into the care of the chaplains, and the body lay still. But history is nothing if not a restless storyteller. In the days that followed, rumors of miracles swirled, flowers blooming on her grave, whispers of her spirit haunting the tower. Thomas Cromwell, her once ally turned executioner of her cause, penned letters of remorse. Too little, too late. Henry, hearing of these portents, is said to have bathed fervently, convinced he smelled Anne's perfume in his chambers. Were these supernatural signs or the echo of collective guilt? You decide, miracle or guilt. In the quiet that settles after a storm, the Tudor court moved on with brutal pragmatism. Within months, Henry wed Jane Seymour. Within years, more wives followed, each hoping to escape Anne's spectral shadow. Parliament repealed her reforms. The break with Rome continued, but tinted by caution. And Anne's daughter, Elizabeth, inherited both crown and curse. Her reign would navigate the tightrope between Protestant zeal and Catholic reconciliation, ever mindful of her mother's fate. What remains of Anne Boleyn today? Her name carved into history, her legacy salted with myth and martyrdom. Tourist guides point to the scaffold site. Novels and films retell her story, each replaying the question, was she a scheming sorceress or a visionary martyr? The truth, as ever, lies buried beneath layers of rumor and Renaissance marble. So, dear viewer, as you reflect on Anne's final breaths, consider this. In a world where favor is fickle and truth is twisted by power, what sacrifices would you make for love, ambition, or faith? Would you dare tilt at the king's mysteries, knowing the only escape might be a block of wood? Share your thoughts. Are you the architect of your destiny, or merely a pawn in a monarch's game? Comment architect or pawn, and let your voice join the centuries-long debate. And if this Tudor tale of roses, thorns, and blood has thrilled you, share this episode with fellow history daredevils. Subscribe for more dives into past nightmares, where the absurd becomes the everyday and survival hinges on wit, will, and a well-timed comment. Until the next descent into history's dark delights, farewell, and may your head stay firmly attached. Have you ever agreed to marry a stranger you'd never met, seen only in a painting so flattering even Photoshop would blush, only to discover on your wedding night that your prince looks more like a half-starved walrus? Let me know in the comments. Would you sign that marriage contract anyway, or call the whole thing off? Now, fasten your corset and steel your nerves. Welcome to the court of Henry VIII and his fourth bride, Anne of Cleves, the Flanders mare, who somehow escaped the chopping block. The moment Anne's ship dropped anchor on the Thames, rumors buzzed louder than the court's beehive headdress fashions. "She looks like a horse," declared one nobleman with a wink. "She's broad as a barn door," snorted another while polishing his doublet. Meanwhile, Anne, raised on silk pillows and schooled in 6 languages, smiled politely, unaware that her glorious portrait had been painted by Hans Holbein himself, in a mood so good he'd stretched her face like fresh dough. Would you trust a painting over a first impression? Comment portrait or presentation below. As Anne stepped onto the shore, Henry's barge glided forward. Imagine the spectacle, trumpets blaring, courtiers bowing so low their codpieces risked grazing the mud, and there he stood, the fat panted king, flushed with anticipation. They greeted each other with a curt nod. Henry offered his arm. Anne curtsied so low her skirt swooshed like a suspicious puddle. Under that polite veneer, meantime, Henry's heart sank faster than a ship's anchor. Would you mask your disappointment with a smile, or spill the tea, hot, scandalous, and embarrassing? Tell me, smile or spill. The wedding feast that followed was extravagance on stilts. Gilded swans roasted whole, goblets overflowing with mead, minstrels strumming tunes that sounded like they'd been composed by drunken jesters. Anne sat at the high table, every eye on her, some judging her posture, others her portly new husband. When Henry raised his cup in toast, his hand trembled slightly. Was he seized by cold feet or indigestion? Anne returned the toast with gleaming courtesy, her thoughts spinning. How does one survive a marriage when the husband compares her to livestock? In the days that followed, Anne toured the palace chambers as though on a guided ghost walk, passing echoes of Catherine's silken dresses and glimpses of Anne Boleyn's vanished jewels. She learned court protocol, nod when commanded, curtsy when informed, and never ever questioned the king's appetite, be it for goose or gossip. One evening, Henry summoned her to the privy chamber. Heart hammering like a fool's drum, she crossed the candlelit hall and found a curt note. Your Highness is excused from further conjugal duties. Ouch! If you received that message, would you huff off in indignation or craft a cheeky reply? Type huff or cheek. But Anne proved to be no shrinking violet. Instead of sulking in her solar, she reclaimed her spoils in a way only a savvy duchess could. She negotiated the sweetest divorce settlement in Tudor history, £50 a week, Richmond Palace, Richmond Park, and all the linen she could steal, choose, for her wardrobes, plus a lifetime stipend and the delightful title, the King's beloved sister. Imagine the look on Katherine Howard's face when she heard Anne of Cleves was richer than the Queen. Would you trade gowns and glory for green fields and freedom? Vote gowns or green. Meanwhile, court gossips threw a parade of insults at Anne: Gothic gargoyle, Dutch doll, walrus with a crown. Yet she laughed them off, practicing her sarcastic curtsies and inviting the most vicious tongues to dine on, roast boar in her new kitchens. She even hosted Elizabeth, the future queen, teaching her French and German, like an aunt you secretly adore for her scandalous humor. If you had to be stuck in an arranged marriage gone wrong, would you rather become a queen or a queen-maker? Comment queen or queen-maker. Anne's real talent, however, was politics by portrait. Whenever Henry eyed his new wives anew, Katherine Howard's youthful charms or Catherine Parr's sharp wit, Anne sent him painted reminders of her virtues, a portrait showing her laughing in a sunny garden, another depicting her penning letters in 4 languages. Subtle, right? Henry chuckled, called her Flanders mare less often, and eventually invited her back to court as a trusted friend. Could you befriend the spouse who rejected you? Trust but never forget? Choose befriend or guard. Through it all, Anne endured the absurdities of Tudor life: massive farthingales that crushed her ribs, perfumed gloves that masked odors of chamber pots, and the ever-present fear of falling out of favor, because in Henry's court, favor was as fickle as the wind. Yet Anne thrived. She organized court masques, danced with ambassadors, and wore English silks so lavish that foreign visitors gasped. And when the fire of religious reform sparked into flames, she remained a quiet supporter, funding translations of the New Testament into German. Would you stand behind a cause in the shadows or lead it from the throne? Vote shadow or throne. By the time Anne breathed her last in 1557, she had outlived 3 of Henry's wives and saw her protégée Catherine Parr survive as well. At her funeral, mourners still murmured, she never wore the crown, but she held her head higher than many queens did. And that, dear viewer, is the absurd, ironic tale of Anne of Cleves, the bride Henry didn't like, but who outlived the lot, proving that sometimes survival, wit, and a well-negotiated divorce trump a royal ring. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into Anne's life as England's most surprisingly powerful dowager, her lavish entertainments, and how she navigated the religious storms of Edward's and Mary's reigns with a smile sharper than any blade. Until then, tell me in the comments, could you survive a marriage that starts with, "We need to talk about the wedding night"? Comment, survive, or retreat, and share this video if you're rooting for the ultimate Tudor underdog. Did you ever walk away from total humiliation with a grin, a castle and a pension, fat enough to buy your own royal court. Anne of Cleves did, divorced in 6 months, but upgraded to king's beloved sister and richer than ever. Now imagine being the ex who shows up at court parties dressed to kill, dancing with ambassadors while your replacement queen plots how to stay alive. Would you party with your ex's new flame or plot your comeback in secret? Comment party or plot, and let's dive into Anne's next level post-divorce glow-up. After the annulment, Anne didn't just survive, she thrived like a phoenix in brocade. Instead of sobbing into lace handkerchiefs, she unpacked her trunks at Richmond Palace, gifted by Henry as part of her We're Still Friends deal. Richmond wasn't just any old manor, it was a sprawling riverside estate with hunting grounds, banqueting halls, and servants who actually respected her. Anne promptly renamed her bedchamber the Freedom Room, and reportedly held a small celebration with imported German wine and a feast for her household. Divorce Party Tudor Edition. Would you rename your chamber Freedom Room or Revenge Suite? Drop freedom or revenge. While Katherine Howard nervously danced around Henry's mood swings, Anne was redecorating with tapestries that told her own story. One reportedly included a weeping king being handed annulment papers. Subtle? Number. Hilarious? Absolutely. Ambassadors from France and the Holy Roman Empire, intrigued by her rise, began calling on her, seeking advice, gossip, and sometimes just her spectacular plum cakes. Anne had become not just the king's ex, but a political player in her own right, careful, calculated, and deliciously underestimated. One ambassador wrote that Anne had the serenity of a saint and the wit of a jester. Translation: she smiled sweetly while delivering insults wrapped in compliments. When Katherine Howard sent her a peace offering of embroidered gloves, Anne graciously accepted, then gifted Katherine an entire hawk for hunting, because nothing says I win like a live bird of prey. If your ex's new partner offered you a gift, would you accept or unleash a hawk-level flex? Choose accept or hawk. Anne's popularity only grew as Henry's court descended into its usual chaos. Katherine Howard, poor thing, lasted less than 2 years before her alleged indiscretions led to the Tower, and eventually the chopping block. As the king wailed about betrayal, Anne sent a discreet note of condolence, and reminded him that she was always loyal. Henry, perhaps for the first time in his life, admitted she'd been a good woman and a wise one. Cue Anne sipping wine by the fire, stroking her hawk and murmuring, "Told you so." As Henry aged, growing increasingly paranoid and ulcerous, Anne became the court's unofficial therapist. Nobles, ladies, even foreign dignitaries turned to her for counsel, safe in the knowledge she didn't have the ambition, or madness, to reclaim the crown. Her drawing room became a salon of diplomacy, laughter, and subtle sabotage. Rumor has it she once turned down a marriage proposal from a minor German prince with the words, "Why exchange palaces for a pigsty? Would you remarry for love, power, or stick with peace and pastries?" Comment love, power, or pastries. Anne's wealth allowed her to live like a queen without the political migraines. She maintained a small but loyal household, funded charitable works, including several hospitals, and patronized artists, especially Holbein, the same painter who caused her marital misfire. She even sat for another portrait, this time unflinchingly realistic. No flattering tricks. Just Anne, regal, serene, and very much in control of her own image. A not-so-subtle message to the world. I'm done pretending. And while Henry married once more, Catherine Parr, scholarly and savvy, Anne maintained cordial relations, even attending court on special occasions. The two women shared more than polite nods. They shared the bond of surviving Henry's whims. Some nights they reportedly played chess together, sharing dry jokes about the king's moods and the perils of Tudor marriage. Imagine the sass in that conversation. Would you prefer to reign or be the power behind the throne? Reign or power, your choice. By now, Anne had become a symbol of something rare in Tudor England, a woman who outlived scandal, kept her head, literally, and built a peaceful, fulfilling life outside the crown's shadow. When Henry died in 1547, Anne wore mourning black for the obligatory period, and then hosted a celebration of life that involved roasted swan, music, and dancing. One guest allegedly remarked, "She mourns with cheer," the ultimate Tudor survivor move. But the political storms weren't over. Henry's death ushered in young King Edward VI, a Protestant boy king with a council that eyed every noble, and especially wealthy women, with suspicion. Anne, now technically a foreigner and fabulously rich, had to walk a tightrope of loyalty and discretion. She avoided court for a time, focusing on her lands, but kept in touch with Elizabeth, her beloved former stepdaughter, offering quiet support and gifts. Anne knew, kings and queens may fall, but influence endures. When Mary I ascended the throne, a Catholic firebrand with a score to settle, many expected Anne to flee. After all, she was a German Protestant, a Tudor outsider. But Anne stayed. She attended Mary's coronation, smiled politely, and offered a generous donation to the crown. Mary, perhaps impressed, or just too busy burning other people, left Anne alone. Survival tip 408. Never poke the bear, especially if it wears a crown. Anne's health began to fail in 1557, but her mind remained sharp. She drafted her will meticulously, ensuring her servants were provided for, her lands passed on peacefully, and her legacy remained intact. Her last words, according to some sources, were, "I was not crowned, but I was queen in all but name." Mic drop, Tudor style. Anne of Cleves was buried in Westminster Abbey, the only one of Henry's wives to rest there, alongside kings and queens. Not bad for the wife he didn't want. So, dear viewer, was Anne a victim, a survivor, or a quiet conqueror? Comment victim, survivor, or conqueror, and stay tuned for part 3, where we dissect her surprising role in Elizabeth's rise and how Anne's legacy shaped the future of England, without ever holding a scepter. Share this video if you believe sometimes the best revenge is living well, and with excellent pastries. Have you ever played the long game so perfectly that history forgot you lost the first round? Welcome back to the saga of Anne of Cleves, the queen who was never crowned but somehow became the Tudor era's ultimate winner. While other wives were losing their heads or their sanity, Anne was living her best divorced life, baking plum cakes, outlasting monarchs, and becoming an unexpected mentor to one of England's greatest queens. Would you rather be remembered for power or peace? Drop power or peace in the comments, and let's dive into Anne's surprising influence on the future Queen Elizabeth III. After Henry's death in 1547, the Tudor court became a royal circus with the tent on fire. Little Edward VI, aged 9, was king in name, but the realm was run by his ambitious uncles and counselors, each scrambling for control. Religion whiplashed from Catholic ritual to hardline Protestant reform, and nobles picked sides faster than you could say heresy. Where was Anne of Cleves in all this chaos? Not scheming in council, not plotting with rebels. No, she was sipping wine at Hever Castle, playing the lute and writing letters. But Anne was no idle observer. Behind her seemingly serene exile, she cultivated a web of relationships, especially with young Elizabeth, who had been declared illegitimate, re-legitimized, and kept under tight watch. Elizabeth, clever and wary, needed allies. Anne, with her own scars from royal life, became a quiet counselor. She sent Elizabeth books in Latin and German, embroidery materials, because nothing says "I've got your back" like a stitched phoenix rising from flames, and most importantly, advice wrapped in riddles. Speak little, listen much, and write everything as if your enemies will read it. Anne reportedly told her, "Would you follow such advice, or speak boldly no matter the risk?" Comment, listen, or speak. Anne's position was delicate. As a German Protestant, she had to tread carefully during Edward's reformist reign. Too Protestant, and she'd appear as a threat. Too Catholic, and she'd be a traitor. So she hosted both Protestant and Catholic visitors, served fish on Fridays, but also funded a Protestant school near her estate. Balance. Thy name is Anne. She even translated religious texts into German and English for private distribution. Not loud, not public, but deeply influential. Can quiet rebellion make lasting change? Tell me quiet or loud. In 1553, Edward died young, throwing England into chaos once more. Enter Mary the Catholic queen known as Bloody Mary to future Protestants, and the Tudor court took a hard turn back to incense, Latin mass, and torch-wielding inquisitions. Many Protestants fled England, but Anne stayed. Why? because Anne had mastered the art of political invisibility, and maybe because she knew Mary didn't view her as a threat. Anne sent Mary warm congratulations, offered her properties for rest and retreat, and gifted her tapestries, featuring biblical heroines surviving trials. Subtle. Would you run from danger or charm your way through it? Choose run or charm. Mary, perhaps out of respect or sheer exhaustion, allowed Anne to keep her estates and title, and Anne, always calculating, maintained correspondence with Elizabeth, who was now viewed with suspicion by her half-sister Queen. Anne's letters to Elizabeth were studied, vague, and filled with metaphors. One note mentioned weathering storms by tending gardens, and the strength of stones and rivers. Elizabeth got the message. Lay low, survive, wait. If you had to hide your intentions, would you use metaphors or direct words? Comment metaphor or direct. Anne's influence grew in subtle ways. Her household became a refuge for scholars, diplomats, and ladies-in-waiting who found the new Marian court oppressive. She provided sanctuary, quietly, and offered these exiles a place to gather, learn, and plan. It wasn't treason, not officially, but it was risky. One Spanish envoy called Anne a relic of the past, but a dangerous one, while an English noble quipped, "She has more sense than all the counselors put together." Anne smiled, curtsied, and served them all goose pie. Her greatest triumph came not with politics, but with patience. When Mary's reign began to collapse under rebellion, religious strife, and her disastrous marriage to Philip of Spain, all eyes turned to Elizabeth, the Protestant hope, the clever survivor. And who had helped mold that survivor? Anne of Cleves. Elizabeth never forgot it. When Mary died and Elizabeth became queen in 1558, Anne, frail, elderly, but still sharp, was invited to court once more, not as queen, not as threat, but as family. At Elizabeth's first royal banquet, Anne reportedly wore a gown of silver and blue, her old colors, and sat beside the new queen. They toasted with spiced wine, laughed at old court gossip, and shared a look only survivors understand. Elizabeth later referred to Anne as wise beyond all women, and ensured that Anne's properties remained untouched, her legacy intact. Anne had survived 4 monarchs, outlived all Henry's wives, and helped shape the queen who would reign for 44 years. Anne's death in 1557, just before Elizabeth's rise, was mourned quietly but deeply. She was buried with dignity in Westminster Abbey, a place of kings, not ex-wives. Her tomb, modest but elegant, reads, Queen of England, a title she wore only briefly but lived fully. Anne's story isn't just about divorce or survival, it's about mastering a system rigged against her, laughing in the face of royal absurdity, and living well enough to become legend. So, was Anne a behind-the-scenes architect of Elizabeth's reign, or simply a lucky survivor of royal roulette? Comment architect or survivor, and stay tuned for part 4, where we explore Anne's legacy, the myths surrounding her, and why she may have been the most cunning of all Henry's wives. Share this video if you believe the best revenge is living long, living well, and outdancing everyone at the final court party. Ready for the final twist in the tale of the wife who wasn't pretty enough, got dumped in record time, and still managed to carve out one of the most unexpectedly epic legacies in royal history? Welcome to part 4 of Anne of Cleves, the wife who wasn't liked but outlived and outsmarted the game. Now let's ask, how does a discarded queen become a symbol of survival, strategy, and savage historical irony? Comment legend if you're ready, and let's send Anne off with the Tudor curtain call she deserves. Anne's legacy didn't come in the form of towering monuments, battle victories, or sweeping political reforms. No, her legacy came from something far rarer. Not dying horribly in Tudor England. Let's recap. Married to Henry VIII? Check. Marriage annulled because she wasn't hot enough? Check. Walks away with castles, cash, and her head still attached? Triple check. That's like winning the Hunger Games of royal matrimony without even drawing a sword. But history didn't always treat Anne kindly. For centuries, she was dismissed as the ugly one, a pawn in political chess, a failed bride whose only achievement was not getting executed. Yet modern historians have been peeling back the layers of propaganda. And surprise, Anne was anything but a passive figure. First off, the whole ugly rumor, courtesy of Henry, who, after seeing Anne in person for the first time, threw a royal tantrum because she didn't match her portrait. Maybe she had a bad travel day. Maybe Holbein was too generous with the cheekbones. Maybe Henry, bloated and gout-ridden, wasn't exactly Prince Charming himself. Let's pause. Would you rather be judged forever by your worst photo or your worst ex? Comment photo or ex and brace yourself for Anne's revenge by reputation. Turns out Holbein's portrait of Anne wasn't that far off. Other courtiers found her pleasant, graceful, and, get this, charming. One ambassador said she had the voice of an angel and the laughter of a sprite. But Henry wanted bombshells and fireworks, and Anne was sensible, composed, and entirely not here for your nonsense. So he cried foul, blamed the portrait, and annulled the marriage, citing non-consummation, which honestly might have been the happiest night of Anne's life. Now here's the delicious twist. By failing to seduce Henry, Anne won her freedom. No queenly duties, no terrifying pregnancies, no court backstabbing. Just a life of leisure, influence, and baked goods. Remember, Katherine Howard pleased Henry and lost her head. Anne disappointed him and gained wealth and peace. Would you rather disappoint power or please it at your peril? Choose disappoint or please. But Anne didn't fade into obscurity. Her post-divorce life inspired a peculiar sort of legend. She became a symbol of how to survive in a world that didn't reward female survival. She was a unicorn in Tudor lore, the divorced wife who didn't end up in the tower. Her story became whispered wisdom. Sometimes the real power move is stepping aside, smiling sweetly, and letting history do the rest. In the centuries that followed, Anne's name was often mocked in textbooks as the boring one, the footnote. But as feminist historians re-examined Tudor women, Anne emerged as the prototype of strategic living. She knew when to fight, never, when to smile, always, and when to walk away, immediately. Her story became a meme before memes existed. When your ex says you're ugly but gives you a castle. Iconic. Fast forward to the present, Anne is now the darling of TV series, novels, musicals. Yes, she's got a solo in 6. And even TikTok reels. Her shade, her survival, her quiet cunning, it's all been rebranded as legendary. And the best part? She never had to scheme, poison, or wage war. She just lived well, waited everyone out, and kept her dignity intact. Ultimate boss move. So how do we remember Anne today? Not as a loser in Henry's dating game, but as the woman who hacked the Tudor system. She turned royal rejection into liberation. She made political exile into domestic bliss. She got out early, got paid, and became the only wife who got to retire. Her tomb at Westminster Abbey may be modest, but her story lives louder than ever. Tourists stand at her grave and say, she's the one who won. And maybe that's all she ever wanted, to be remembered not as Henry's failure, but as history's quiet champion of survival. Now, the final question, if you lived in Anne's world, would you dare to be loud or smart enough to be underestimated? Comment loud or smart. And remember, in a world full of Catherines, Annes, and Janes, sometimes the greatest triumph is simply living to tell the tale. Thanks for joining Anne's story. Share this video if you believe history's true. Queens aren't always the ones who wore the crown, but the ones who wore the scars and survived. Have you ever tried walking through snow that's up to your waist, wearing nothing but animal skins and sheer prehistoric determination? Welcome to Ice Age travel, where every step could be your last, every breath hurts, and hunting a mammoth is somehow easier than finding dry socks. Today, we dive into the frosty madness of how cavemen, yes, your distant, shivering ancestors, managed to travel, hunt, and stay alive in a world buried in snow. Would you survive a week in the Ice Age? Comment Ice Warrior or Snow Nope below, and let's jump into the snowdrift of history. Let's set the scene. It's about 20,000 years ago, give or take a few frozen toes. You wake up in a cave, because central heating hasn't been invented yet, and realize the entire world outside is a frozen hellscape. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius. The snowdrifts are taller than your hut, and somewhere out there, a mammoth is walking around like it owns the place. Your job? Hunt it, without dying. Simple. First things first, travel. Snow in the Ice Age wasn't just a pretty background for your Instagram. It was deep, relentless, and absolutely soul-destroying. Imagine trying to cross miles of snow-covered terrain in leather boots held together with sinew. Not waterproof, not insulated, and definitely not designer. Cavemen had to invent hacks to survive. Enter the snowshoe. Yes, prehistoric people in regions like what we now call Siberia, Canada, and Northern Europe actually developed early snowshoes, flat wooden frames tied to their feet to help distribute weight and keep them from sinking into the snow like a frozen pancake. Genius? Yes. Comfortable? Not even close. Comment snowshoe life if you think you could rock a pair of ancient wooden flippers. Now let's talk hunting, because you can't just DoorDash a mammoth steak. Cavemen had to move through snow, find the prey, and somehow take it down. How? By working in terrifyingly organized groups. Picture a dozen fur-clad humans moving silently across a snowfield, holding spears tipped with flint, communicating with hand signals and guttural sounds like a prehistoric SWAT team. Their strategy? Drive animals toward natural traps, like cliffs, ice-covered rivers, or pits dug under the snow. Yes, these people dug traps in frozen ground, using bone tools, frostbitten hands, and pure rage against winter. Would you dig a pit to catch your dinner, or just eat snow and cry? Comment pit digger or snow eater. But wait, what about those famous mammoths? They weren't just walking hamburgers. These beasts were smart, massive, and fully capable of trampling you into prehistoric goo. So cavemen developed ambush tactics. One group would drive the mammoth into a narrow valley, while others waited with spears and clubs. Sometimes they even used fire, yes, fire in the snow, to scare animals into running the right direction. Imagine trying to light a fire with flint and dry moss while snow is falling and your hands are numb. That's not camping, that's insanity with extra steps. And yet, they did it, regularly. Clothing? Oh, you want to talk fashion. Caveman winter style was all about layers. Animal skins, deer, wolf, bear, even mammoth, were stitched together using bone needles and gut thread. These were not sleek, tailored outfits. They were walking piles of fur, bulky, heavy, and slightly smelly, but warm, very warm. Also, some groups used grease, yes, animal fat, to waterproof their clothing. So if you ever feel gross putting on moisturizer, remember your ancestors smeared bear fat on themselves just to avoid freezing. And now, a brief word on sleds. Yes, early humans invented sleds. When the snow got too deep and they had to transport meat, supplies, or grandma, they tied everything to wooden frames and dragged them over the snow. No wheels, no engines, just raw human willpower and occasionally, dogs. Some of the earliest domesticated dogs may have been used to help pull sleds or carry supplies. Imagine yelling at your dog to haul 100 pounds of mammoth meat while you trudge behind in snowshoes. Bonding moment or ancient nightmare? Comment dog sled or not my job. Night travel? Forget about it. Ice Age humans didn't mess with the dark. Once the sun dipped, temperatures plummeted and predators like wolves and saber-toothed cats came out to play. So they huddled around fires in caves, sharing stories, chewing on jerky, and desperately trying not to freeze. Fire was life, not just for heat, but for light, cooking, and protection. Losing your fire in the snow was basically a death sentence, which is why some groups carried ember pots, small containers with glowing coals wrapped in moss, to relight fires quickly, portable heat in a prehistoric thermos. Let's talk food on the go. You can't exactly have a picnic when it's snowing sideways. So cavemen developed high-energy, portable snacks, dried meat, rendered fat, and foraged nuts or berries. Pemmican, a mix of dried meat and fat, was the original protein bar. It looked gross, tasted worse, but kept you alive. If you had to eat the same thing every day for a month, would you pick jerky or pemmican? Comment jerky or pemmican. That's a part 1 of our icy deep dive into how cavemen braved the snowpocalypse of prehistory. Think you could survive in a world where every breath is a struggle and your only transport is a dog-powered sled? Let me know and brace yourself for part 2, where we explore the social chaos, snow blindness, and mammoth stampedes of everyday Ice Age life. Ready to dive back into the frosty chaos of prehistoric survival? Welcome to part 2 of how cavemen traveled and hunted in deep snow, where things get colder, hungrier, and just a little more ridiculous. If you think modern winter is bad, try surviving snow blindness, frostbite, and the occasional mammoth stampede. Comment, Snow madness, if you're still with us, because it's about to get brutal. Let's start with the social side of Ice Age living. Cavemen weren't just lone wolves grunting in caves. They formed tight-knit groups, tribes, clans, prehistoric survival squads. Why? Because snow is unforgiving, and teamwork meant the difference between roast mammoth and frozen corpse. Social roles were critical: hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, firekeepers, and the all-important shaman, a mix of spiritual leader, healer, and community therapist with a flair for bone jewelry. Ever think your family gatherings are chaotic? Try 20 people huddled in a cave, arguing over who ate the last piece of dried reindeer liver. And here's a fun nightmare: snow blindness, staring at endless white for days. Not great for your eyeballs. Cavemen in snowy regions figured out early on that the sun reflecting off snow can cook your retinas. Their solution? Early snow goggles. Yup, strips of bone or wood with tiny slits worn over the eyes to reduce glare. It was like wearing ancient Oakleys, if Oakleys were made of elk femur and pain. Functional? Yes. Stylish? Debatable. Comment snow goggles if you'd wear prehistoric shades, or blind me if you'd just risk it. Now, let's address mobility again. Travel was exhausting. To move from one hunting ground to another, cavemen often followed animal migration routes, which meant trekking across snowy plains, frozen rivers, and treacherous mountain passes. Did they have GPS? Nope, but they did have one major advantage: instinctive tracking skills. These people could read a footprint like a detective reads a crime scene. A few scuffs in the snow. That's a herd of reindeer, 2 days old, heading northwest. Crushed branches? Woolly rhino. Also, danger. If you had to track your dinner using only footprints and frozen dung, would you survive? Comment track star or nope dung. And now, the mammoth stampede. It happened. Herds of these giant beasts would sometimes panic, especially when hunted and run en masse. Imagine the ground shaking, the snow flying, and your only option being climb a tree or die. Except there were barely any trees. Cavemen had to plan their hunts meticulously to avoid getting flattened. They learned to read the wind, move silently, and use the landscape. Hills, ravines, ice shelves, all part of the plan. Sometimes stampedes were intentional. Drive the herd into a trap, collect the meat. Genius or madness? Comment stampede wizard if you'd pull that off, or squished human if you'd just become mammoth mush. Cold injuries were everywhere. Frostbite, hypothermia, and something called chilblains. A delightful mix of itchy, swollen, painful skin from constant cold exposure. Cavemen had one treatment: don't get cold. Easier said than done. Fires were everything, and keeping them lit in snow was an art form. Cave interiors were blackened from constant smoke. Your lungs? Probably half charcoal by age 30. But hey, warm. Tool making? Oh yes, the caveman's version of a survival kit. Flint knives, bone needles, antler scrapers. But winter brought special tools. Ice chisels, snow axes, sled runners. Every item had to be made by hand. No stores, no spares. Break your snowshoe mid-hunt? That's your foot frozen. Better hope someone brought extra sinew, and you always carried sinew. Speaking of hunting tools, enter the atlatl. What's that? A spear thrower. This clever invention let cavemen hurl spears farther and with more force, essential when your prey was woolly, angry, and armored in fur. Mastering the atlatl took years. Miss your throw and your dinner. Hit your target. Feast for days. Would you be an atlatl pro or a spear-flinging disaster? Comment sharpshooter or twig thrower. Let's not forget shelters. Caves were great, but not always available. So what then? Snow huts, baby. Think igloo, but primitive. Some groups built shelters from snow blocks, others from bones and hides. Yes, bones. Mammoth rib cages formed the framework for tents covered in fur. Cozy? Questionable. Impressive? Absolutely. Sleeping in a tent made of bones, that's metal. Comment bone tent if you're moving in, or no thanks if you're hiking to the next cave. And finally, predators. Snow didn't just bring cold, it brought teeth. Wolves, cave lions, saber-toothed cats, all hunting the same prey as humans. Sometimes hunting humans. Night guards were essential. Fires had to be kept burning, weapons close. Imagine waking up to growling in the dark, snow swirling, and realizing you are the target. Sleep well, right? So ends part 2 of our Ice Age Odyssey. Ready for part 3, where we explore ancient snowstorms, snow-based warfare, and the never-ending war against frozen feet. Comment, Frost Rage, if you're brave enough to continue. Welcome back to part 3 of how cavemen traveled and hunted in deep snow. You've survived the stampede, the frostbite, and the bone tents, but now it's time for snowstorms, primitive snowball fights, and the ultimate enemy, soggy feet. Comment Ice Age Insanity if you're ready to freeze your brain cells off with prehistoric absurdity. Let's talk snowstorms, not the gentle, Instagram-worthy kind. We're talking blizzards that could erase landscapes, freeze your nostrils shut, and reduce visibility to, I can't see my own mammoth skin mitten. Cavemen couldn't check the weather app, so how did they know a storm was coming? Animal behavior. If the reindeer were restless and the birds flew low, it was panic time. Cue the frenzied cave dash, fires stoked, food hoarded, entrances blocked with hides and stones. It wasn't cozy. It was survival in a howling white void. Comment blizzard beast if you think you'd thrive, or snow cave potato if you'd just curl up and wait for nature to end you. And then there's the worst thing imaginable in ancient winter. Wet feet. Wool socks? Nope. Waterproof boots? Try animal hide shoes sealed with fat and sinew. If your footgear failed and snow seeped in, frostbite wasn't far behind. Cavemen knew to dry their shoes near the fire, but not too close. Burnt shoes meant barefoot misery. Foot care was serious business. People even stuffed their footwear with moss for insulation. Nature's socks. Comment moss feet if you'd rock that look, or freeze toes if you just give up. Let's spice things up with Ice Age combat, because when resources are scarce and everyone's hangry, things get stabby. Clans fought over hunting grounds, shelters, and sometimes just out of sheer cold-induced rage. Snow battles weren't organized warfare. Think ambushes in the snow, weapons made of stone, and lots of yelling. Spears, clubs, maybe even slings. Snow was both cover and weapon. Yes, snowballs happened, but imagine one with a rock inside. Welcome to caveman tactics. Comment snow warrior if you'd join the fight, or peaceful gatherer if you'd hide behind the mammoth tent. And now, let's meet the real MVP of Ice Age survival. Fire. Making fire in snow? Not a beginner skill. Cavemen used flint and pyrite to spark dry tinder. But in snow, dry tinder was rare, which meant carrying it with you at all times. If your tinder got wet, you were doomed to a cold, dark, meatless night. Fire meant warmth, light, cooked food, and safety from predators. Losing your fire starter was like losing your smartphone, but with higher risk of freezing to death. Comment Tinder God if you'd keep that flame alive, or a frost snack if you'd be eaten by a saber-tooth. Let's talk food preservation. Winter had its perks, like natural refrigeration. Meat could be stored in snow pits away from animals. But the downside? Everything froze solid. Ever tried gnawing on frozen mammoth jerky? It was a dental apocalypse. Cavemen had to thaw their meals by the fire or stew them in bone pots. No, really, they cooked using hot stones in hide-lined pits or primitive pots. Gourmet? Not exactly, but edible. Comment snow chef if you'd cook like that, or tooth shatter if you'd just fast. Snow navigation was an art. Landmarks vanished under snowdrifts. Cavemen used stars, animal trails, and memory. But sometimes they got lost. Being lost in a prehistoric blizzard wasn't a fun camping trip. It was panic, hunger, and possibly a cave bear encounter. Survival meant retracing steps, finding shelter fast, and praying you weren't circling the same frozen tree stump. Comment Snow Scout if you'd find your way, or Lost Popsicle if you'd become an ice sculpture. And finally, the music of winter. Yes, cavemen made music even in snow. Flutes made of bone, drums of stretched hide. Music lifted spirits, passed time, and maybe scared off predators. Imagine huddling in a snow hut, listening to bone flute solos and rhythmically thumping on frozen log drums while the wind howls outside. It was the Ice Age version of a Spotify playlist. Comment bone beats if you'd jam out, or no thanks if you'd prefer silence and dread. That wraps up part 3 of our icy saga. In part 4, we'll dive into the big finale: ancient snow rituals, death-defying survival stories, and the long journey toward not freezing every single winter. Comment Final Frost if you're still alive and want to see how this ends. Welcome to part 4 of how cavemen traveled and hunted in deep snow. You've endured frozen feet, prehistoric brawls, and mammoth meat popsicles, but now we're diving into ancient snow rituals, survival miracles, and how cavemen slowly figured out how not to die every winter. If you're still here, comment Final Frost, and let's embrace the icy madness one last time. Let's start with rituals. Because when life is nasty, brutish, and frozen, you need to make sense of the suffering. Enter snow rituals. Cavemen believed snowstorms were the wrath of sky spirits, mammoth gods, or just really bad luck. So, they danced around fires in the snow, wearing animal masks and chanting in languages lost to time. It wasn't TikTok worthy, but it was their way of saying, "Please stop the blizzard before we all become ice statues." Comment Snow Shaman if you join the ritual, or Cold Skeptic if you just roll your eyes and freeze. Sacrifices were also a thing. No, not people, usually, but prized items like tools, food, or carvings were offered to nature in the hope of better weather or successful hunts. Sometimes the youngest hunter had to sleep outside for a night as a test of strength. Translation: hazing but with hypothermia. Comment Sacrificial Snowball if you'd survive the ritual, or Icicle Intern if you'd be the one left outside. Now, the Musher Miracle survivors. Imagine getting caught in a blizzard with nothing but your wits, a stone knife, and a handful of dried berries. There are stories, yes, even from prehistory, of lone survivors who endured days in snow caves, fought off wolves with firebrands, or used reindeer hides to fashion makeshift sleds and escape. Legendary? Absolutely. Comfortable? Not even close. These survivors became cave celebrities, and their tales were carved into stone or told around fires for generations. Comment Blizzard Boss if you'd be one of them, or Snow Snack if you'd become a cautionary tale. Let's not forget children in the Ice Age. Survival wasn't just an adult nightmare. Kids learned early how to navigate snow, start fires, and avoid predators. Snowball fights? More like training for survival. Toys were bones, sticks, and snow itself. Education was hands-on, and failure meant a mammoth chase or frostbite. Childhood innocence? Meet prehistoric boot camp. Comment Ice Age Kid if you'd tough it out, or Cave Daycare if you'd need a mammoth skin blanket. Now, onto innovation. Cavemen weren't just suffering, they were adapting. Enter the first snowshoes. Early versions were flat wood, strapped to feet with hide, inspired by animals like lynxes or snow hares. Clunky, but better than sinking waist-deep with every step. These innovations spread tribe to tribe, eventually evolving into effective travel tools. Winter travel got faster, hunting more efficient, and snow less of a death trap. Comment Snowshoe Legend if you'd invent them, or Sunken Snow if you'd trudge helplessly. Speaking of hunting, let's talk traps. Hunting in deep snow wasn't all spears and glory. Traps were key. Pitfalls hidden under snow, snares for small game, and baited lures were all used. Sometimes the hunter became the hunted. Cue the classic snow leopard ambush. But when traps worked, it meant food without a dangerous chase. Comment Trap Master if you'd thrive, or Bait Blunder if you'd end up in your own trap. Now, let's tackle Nar travel evolution. After centuries of snow agony, humans got smarter. Sledges were born. Dragged by humans or early domesticated animals like reindeer, they hauled supplies, meat, even injured clan members. No wheels, just smooth, frozen suffering. But it worked. Trade and migration became possible. Humanity started to move through snow, not just survive it. Comment Sled Boss if you'd ride, or Sledge Dragger if you'd be the one pulling. And finally, the transition. The Ice Age thawed slowly. Cavemen adapted again. They built better shelters, learned farming, and stopped moving constantly. Snow became less of a death sentence, more of a seasonal inconvenience. But the knowledge remained: how to survive the worst winters, how to travel through snow, how to hunt when the world was frozen solid. That ancient legacy lives on in our winter gear: snow travel and deep ancestral fear of wet socks. Comment Final Frost if you made it, and let us know which part of Ice Age survival you'd master, or fail epically. Thanks for surviving this frosty journey. Subscribe for more historical madness and prehistoric pain, and don't forget to comment your favorite Ice Age disaster. Until next time, stay warm or try.